Good evening, good morning, and good night. Welcome to Inappropriate Radio. It's your host, Shauna. Let's get into this. So, hi guys. I hope all is well. I have been doing research for this segment, and let me just tell y'all, it is an overwhelming amount of information. It's so much information. There is no way I can put topics like these in like one or two segments. This series is probably going to be a little longer than I thought it was going to be, and a lot of the times these segments are more than likely going to run over 15 minutes. I'll try to keep it down because I know everybody's busy and we don't know how to have our attention kept for long, but I definitely think this is a lot of crazy information. Now, it appears that as far back as researchers went, astrology and astronomy were always around amongst many cultures, and was always considered a way of life, or at least as a way to live, meaning astrology and astronomy. Now, depending on who you ask, you will get a different answer. What you may consider to be one could be considered the other, depending on where you are geographically. Because you remember, astronomy and astrology are often intertwined, and some cultures do differentiate, make the distinction, and some don't. So that's why I'm saying it depends on where you are geographically and who you ask, right? Astrology was actually used across many cultures as a way to determine when to start putting crops down. These calculations actually were used from celestial events to actually make medicine. I found that really interesting, and to even predict specific life events. So we know that, right? This kind of went on until around the 16th or 17th century, and then you started to see a decline in the practice and even the overall belief of astrology and astronomy. Around that same time, a group of mathematicians and astrologers came together and actually made astrology a trade, an education, and an organization where they were able to possibly, or where they attempted to bring astrology and astronomy back into the conversation and have it alongside with religion. Magi and the sons of Seth were often used as a basis for that conversation amongst that group of people who were, trying to pretty much bring astrology and astronomy back around, because it was practiced as a religion for centuries. Now, it kind of faded away until the 19th and 20th centuries due to spiritualism and the New Age philosophy. Now, remember, we always talk about time just vaguely. Even if you do it vaguely think about the 19th and the 20th centuries. Think about that era. Think about the years that encompasses those, that these centuries encompass, and think about the events that affected everyone, right? Because we always talk about time, and the point I'm making is that, the heavens and all of the celestial bodies definitely affect us in so many ways. And then you had a lot of people who don't believe in that, and even back then you had a lot of people going so far to combat that idea, so much so that they were even publishing books speaking against astrology and astronomy and how ridiculous it actually was. Now, remember, there is a difference between astrology and astronomy, right? So, I'm sorry, because I'm looking for the paper. I don't want to say this wrong, but remember, there's different types. But let's just get back to the different types. Now remember, you have astronomy that studies the celestial bodies. It's pretty much a science, and they do overlap one another. That's why it's really, really hard. But I'm just trying to find the paper. Astronomy studies the movements of the heavens, whereas astrology is broken down into two parts. There's a scientific component, and it talks about the sun and the moon and stars, and then there's a theoretical component because of the predictions that are made using astrology. Now, you have different people from all parts of the world who publish books, who did research, who, ran experiments, and they were all able to come up with different things at different points of time. Now, remember how we talked about the different types of astrology. There's even, it's so much, it's just a lot. But for the most part, the roots of all of these different systems are pretty much the same. But then when you start to go in, and get more refined and more informed, you'll start seeing the differences. Some differences are vast and some are minute, so it depends on who you're asking and what you're comparing. Now, so Western astrology is it focuses on the movements of celestial bodies, like the sun and the moon and the stars or whatever, and the movements of the sign through the signs of the zodiac. Now, when I read that, I was like, wait, why does it sound like they're making a distinction between zodiac and signs? And actually, there is a distinction. The zodiac is a belt. Like how we have Orion's belt, the zodiac is also a belt, and it's a belt of heavens divided into 12 divisions or signs. So Western astrology highlights only 1/12 of those signs because it only focuses on the location of the sun during the birth, right? It doesn't go into the other things in your chart like some other systems does, right? And then there's a relationship. So when you have this movement of the sun going through the belt, when you come out, the sun will be placed in a particular arrangement, right? There's 12 places that it can be. It can only be in one place at one time. So that's what determines your sun sign, right? Then you have the relationship between these 7 planets. Now, these 7 planets, the relationship between those 7 planets are going to determine the relationship going on in the heavens, and that how it manifests down into your life and your personality. Now, remind you, this is as far as Western astrology goes, right? Tarot cards are also a Western astrology thing. It was adopted by many other cultures later on. Now, when it comes to Vedic is the more modern term, where Vedic was later on, implemented into Hindu texts, but originally it was referred to as Hindu or Indian astrology. It started in the Hellenistic era, which that is like around the era of the death of Alexander the Great. You can look that up. Greece, Western Asia, Northeastern Africa, they were all coming together, and that was like that era. The celestial placements pretty much are described and referred to as there's also names in Hindu or Indian or Vedic astrology, but there's so much because they're referring to the planets and the celestial movements. And again, there's really like no real official time frames on on these texts or these different periods. Like, they don't really have anything documented as far as time. Now, Indian astrology uses calculations, based off of celestial movements to make predictions and determine, whatever they're going to determine, because there's different types of this Hindu. It breaks down into like a major umbrella. So it's so much. I would never ever do that on a podcast. Like, it's so much. If I was screen sharing, then yeah, totally. But like, to just ramble on about that, no way. Now, Chinese astrology is really similar to Chinese philosophy. They didn't prescribe to Western Asia and Europe systems. They came up with their own system, where they feel the sky has 3 enclosures. There are 28 mansions. I'm going to assume those mansions are the heavens. I know people say there's 7. Some people say there's 12. I believe there is no number you can put on that. 28 mansions. You can look that up. And there are 12 animal signs. These animal signs are making reference to personality types. They go into it's based off yearly cycles, lunar months, and 2 12-hour periods, which is obviously day or night, right? Now, in Chinese astrology, well, as far as philosophy goes, you have the yin and the yang, and then that's in there. So I'm going to assume that that's the day and the night. And then you have other Asian cultures that have adopted astrology. Korea mimics Chinese astrology to the T. Then you have Vietnam, Thai, Japan, and a lot of other places that have, similar systems. But there are some differences that, you can see now. There are a lot of different periods. You have this thing called, there are many eras where astrologers were basically looked at as, some of the most desired people. If you wanted to, astrology was so important back then that it was brought up in the same conversation as religion. And if you wanted to get advice, a lot of the advice from the elders was based on astrological or celestial events, right? And this is not to confuse any of this stuff with divination, but because a lot of the scholars studied religion, spirituality, astrology, astronomy, divination, they were all kind of brought up in the same conversation, and that's how they pretty much kind of started being used interchangeably. Because remember, a lot of these people were considered stargazers, psychopaths, scientists, mathematicians, researchers, philosophers, scholars, right? Just all around scholars. So a lot of them were just doing their thing. Even during the medieval time, this particular period, a lot of people were using astrology as the basis for everything that they did. And remember, we're talking about medicine being, coming up with formulas for medicine based off of observations and calculations of celestial bodies and events, right? So, like I said, it's so much information. There's no way that we can have this thing in just one segment. Now, what I did find interesting about Western astrology was that it's a combination of Babylonian and Egyptian astrology. So the Babylonian or the Greece part is where you have the sign rulership and the 4 elements, right? But the Egyptian part is decanic astrology, where it breaks down the 12 signs into decans, and then each of those decans have 10 degrees, right? And there's the major focus on the ascendant sign comes from the Greece part also. So yeah, I'm gonna stop there because we're over 15 minutes. But yeah, guys, I'm having fun with this. We're gonna start doing charts in a minute. Yeah, and I don't want to get too deep because I'm gonna get lost in the topic if I keep going. But I just kind of wanted to go over the 3 main systems of astrology because there's so much. I mean, this thing was considered as part of religion. You know, even in Islam, there was a thing where the Arabian and the Persian Muslims, where they had astrology texts and translated so they would be able to learn more about, you know, astrology and astronomy so it can be practiced, because they were seeing how, you know, people were living based off of their predictions and their, you know, their observations. So I said I was going to stop. So yeah, I love you guys. I hope your day was good. I hope you eat something good, you sleep well, you eat some fruit, drink some water, and mind your business, right? But yeah, I'm gonna go. I love y'all, and I hope y'all have a good night. Love y'all. Peace.